Hi folks, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the Pudel, the Tier 6 Polish Premium Medium tank. This tank is not currently available from the tech tree or the premium shop, but I have absolutely no doubts that Wargaming will be bringing it back for purchase soon, maybe during the Christmas period. But as per usual, we'll start with the history, and despite its name, this is a Panther. It's a Panther Aus G to be exact. Now, I've covered the Panther's history on the channel before, plenty of times on the channel before, but this was Germany's third most mass-produced tank during World War II after the Stug and the Panzer IV, with over 6,000 of these being built, including all its variations. Now, the most common variation was the Panther Aus G, which is this tank here, and that had 3,000 of them built between 1944 and 1945. Now, what differed between the Panther Aus G and the early variants is that it had 50mm of side armor compared to 40mm on the earlier versions. The cupola was also changed from a drum shape to a rounded shape, so you can see a rounded cupola here, or thereabouts, if I can get it correct. So you can see that it's actually rounded and not a drum shape. So if we go into the tech tree and we jump to the VK3002M and we go to preview, basically you can see a drum shaped cupola here. In fact, we'll upgrade this so it's fully upgraded, and essentially what we have then is the same tank as the Pudel. So this is pretty much the Panther prototype. The VK3002M is the Panther prototype, but you can see a big difference in the cupola here is that it's a drum shape compared to the rounded cupola on the Aus G or the Pudel. Now, on the original Ace Tanker video, someone pointed out in the comments that the gun mantlet was historically inaccurate, but it's not. No, this is an historically accurate gun mantlet. Now, as you can see here, the gun mantlet is very rounded, but there was another gun mantlet which had a chin. You can see an extra layer of armor underneath the rounded gun mantlet here. Now, this is a later version of the gun mantlet, and it was designed because the early Panthers or the early variants had many problems. You know, a lot of the common theory is that they were rushed into service. They had a lot of breakdown problems. They had a lot of fires. Panthers were known to go on fire just driving off the production line or driving off the railway carts as soon as they got to their destination. And these problems resulted in a lot of delays. In fact, the most famous delays resulted in the postponing of the start of the Battle of Kursk by almost 5 months, and basically that postponing of the Battle of Kursk had a huge impact on World War II because the Russians ended up winning due to the fact that the delays with the Panthers and the early production problems allowed the Russians time to prepare their defenses. So the Battle of Kursk was delayed because of the Panther problems, and by the time the Panther problems had been sorted out, the Russians had their defenses in place and ended up winning that particular battle. Now, there is another theory I came across recently that is that the early problems the Panthers were having when they first started coming off the production lines weren't all just because the tank was being rushed into service. The other theory states that all the Panthers, or a lot of the Panther early problems, were caused by sabotage, because the Panther was built using slave labor to keep costs down. Essentially, you could build 2 Panthers for the same price as every 1 Tiger 1. So slave labor was used to keep costs down, and after the war, the French examined a number of Panthers and found that many of them had been built to fail in the factory. So the workers were sabotaging the Panthers as they built them. So that's just another theory I came across recently, but that brings us back to the gun mantlet, because the gun mantlet was a problem for the Panther. You see, even though the rounded design was designed to deflect shells, the problem is that shells that came in and hit the bottom of the gun mantlet here would be deflected down and into the crew compartment through the top of the hull. So this was considered a weak point on pretty much all Panthers, including the Aus G. So in order to address this, a new gun mantlet was designed, and it included a chin. And from September 1944, Panthers were slowly converted to use the new gun mantlet. But it happened very slowly and didn't happen until September 1944, which brings us back to the Pudel, which is a Polish tank. Now, this is a Panther Aus G using the original gun mantlet, and it was one of 2 Panthers captured by the Polish resistance during the Warsaw Uprising that began in August 1944. 1924. So these tanks were captured before any of the new gun mantlets with the chin were installed, which makes this historically accurate. Now, the two Panthers that were captured were named Pudel and Magda by the Polish resistance. Pudel was used in the street fighting around Warsaw, whereas Magda was used to liberate a concentration camp that was outside the city. Now, after 3 days of fighting, the two tanks ran out of fuel and were abandoned and set on fire to prevent the Germans from recapturing them. Now, I went into a lot more history regarding the uprising itself during the original Pudel Ace Tanker video, but to cut a long story short, that's how we got our first Polish tank in World of Tanks. It's a captured Panther Aus G, and it could just have easily been called Magda as opposed to Pudel. And as per usual, we're going to be comparing the Pudel against all the other Tier 6 premium mediums in the game. We're going to pop into Tanks GG for this. But before I start the comparison, we're just going to do a very, very quick side-by-side between the Pudel and the VK3002M up here, because the VK3002M is the regular Tier 6, at least one of the regular Tier 6 mediums in-game for the Germans, and it's the Panther prototype. So we've got a Panther Aus G and the Panther prototype, both at Tier 6 up here, and what you can basically see is it's pretty much the same tank. Same DPM, same rate of fire, same accuracy, same caliber, same shell velocity. The ammo capacity is a little bit bigger on the Aus G, but that's about the only difference there. The gun handling and stats are all the same. Mobility is exactly the same, even though for some reason the VK3002M is slightly lighter, but that reason is down to the fact it gets less side armor. We'll get into that in a moment, but you can pretty much see that essentially it's the same tank. Even though it's a little bit, the Pudel's a little bit heavier, it has a slightly worse power to weight ratio, but then the VK3002M gets slightly better ground resistance while turning for some reason. But we come down to armor and health, and what you can see here is the main difference between the Aus G and the prototype or the early variants of Panther is that even though they've got the same frontal armor, they've got it's the Pudel has 50, or the Aus G has 50 millimeters of side armor compared to 40 on the VK3002M. Both tanks have 40 on the rear. Turret armor is identical, and then for some reason the Pudel gets slightly better spaced armor when you hit its tracks, but that's essentially it. It's the same tank. So if you want to experience the Pudel without actually buying it, then just go ahead and grind out or buy the VK3002M. It's pretty much the same tank. The only difference is that the Pudel gets 10 millimeters more side armor, which makes it a better side scraper than the VK3002M. But as I say, this is a fully upgraded Tier 6, and the Pudel is pretty much a fully upgraded Tier 6, but just slightly better. So comparing it against most of the other Tier 6 premium mediums in the game, there's a couple I've left off because they might be an autoloader or aren't in the game yet, but comparing it to most of the other Tier 6 premium mediums, how does the Pudel stack up? What are we expecting just looking at the stats in the Tanks GG? Well, first of all, the DPM is average. It's good DPM at over 2,000, but it's average compared to the Tier 6 premium mediums. Some of the others have it beaten, some of the others are slightly worse. When it comes to penetration, that's actually okay. It's got the second best penetration at 150. 171 is the best on the AC4, so penetration is a positive. When it comes to alpha damage, once again, not particularly high, but not the worst. There are some that are worse, so it's got same alpha damage as the Cromwell B, but worse alpha damage than most of the other tanks, with the exception of the M4 variants. So alpha damage is okay, I suppose, but it's not great, but penetration definitely is good. When it comes to rate of fire, it's, you know, again, average. Doesn't come top, doesn't come bottom. Reload time seems to be, average as well. Shell velocity is good. It comes in at 925, which means it's going to be easier to hit moving targets. Not the best shell velocity, but not the worst. The Rudy and the T-3485M have it beaten, but it's significantly better than most of the other tanks up here. So shell velocity seems to be a positive, even though it's not the best. Next positive for the tank is it gets 81 rounds of ammunition, which is more than any of the other tanks up here. So you get second best potential damage. So chances of running out of ammunition in the Pudel are quite low, and you do get decent potential damage compared to most of the other Tier 6 premium mediums. When it comes to gun handling, nothing special here either. Even though the Panzer IV-S is using the same gun, it gets better aim time, better soft stats for the gun. Aim time is the joint worst aim time, but 2.21 is not bad. It is not bad. It's, similar to the Fury or the Cromwell B, and the Skoda T40. Most of the other tanks have it, or well, some of the other tanks have it beaten, but it's not bad. It's just not particularly good. The accuracy is on the good side. Only the Panzer IV-S, even though it's the same gun, has it beaten. So 0.34 accuracy beats most of the other tanks, with the exception of the 4S. Soft stats again seems to be pretty average for the gun handling. Gun depression 8 degrees. Again, nothing amazing here. It's average. So 7, 7, and 6 on the two Russians and the Czech tanks. Similar gun depression on the Cromwell B and the Panzer IV-S, and then the American tanks have it beaten. So again, nothing special. It's looking to be a very, very average tank, with the exception of the penetration, which seems to be quite good, and the shell velocity. But other than that, I'm not seeing anything here that makes the Pudel stand out. We come down to mobility, and it's okay. Have we skipped anything? Yeah, no, we haven't. When it comes to mobility, it's okay. Once again, it is very average. 55 kilometers an hour top speed is pretty good. But it's not the best. Although the AC4 Experimental really can't lay claim to be better than the Pudel as regards top speed, because it will never reach it. But you know, it's still pretty good. Only the Cromwell B really has the top speed beaten. When it comes to reverse speed, 20 kilometers an hour reverse speed, again, joint best reverse speed. So again, mobility seems to be quite good. It gets a decent engine at 700 horsepower, which is the joint best engine, and the power to weight ratio is 15.82, which is again better than most of the tanks up here. Not the best, but better than most of the tanks up here. So it seems to be relatively mobile. But then we come down to terrain resistance, and what you can see is most of the other tanks have the terrain resistance well beaten, with the exception of maybe the T-34-85M. So most of the other tanks have less engine power, less horsepower to weight ratio, but have got better ground resistance. So I guess that kind of evens out slightly. The Pudel, it's still pretty mobile, but it could be even more mobile if the ground resistance was a little bit better, but it's not. Every other tank pretty much has it beaten. And then we come down to armor and health, and we come to another positive for the Pudel. So a lot of averages, but another positive here. We've got the best hull armor, with the exception of the Thunderbolt, because it's got spaced armor, but best hull armor of 85mm frontal hull, 50mm of side armor, which again is the best side armor of any of the tanks up here, which makes this a very good side scraper because it doesn't get overmatched by 122mm guns, and 40mm of rear armor seems to be amongst the best as well. So the hull armor, definitely a positive for the Pudel. When it comes to turret armor, more positives, because we get 100mm of frontal armor. Only the Panzer IV-S has it beaten. We get 45 on the side, 45 on the rear. So side and rear hull or turret armor, not amazing, but frontal turret, frontal hull, side of the hull seems to be pretty good. Definitely a positive for the Pudel over any of the other tanks up here. View range seems to be, again, a positive at 370. It's got the joint best top view range, so you can boost that with equipment and cruise skills if you choose, and that's pretty much it. Also, the radio range, it's got the joint best radio range with the Skoda T40, but yeah, it doesn't seem to stand out. What we're learning from the stats here is it's got decent penetration. The alpha damage, not particularly high, but it's okay. The DPM is okay. Mobility is, actually on the good side for Tier 6 premium mediums, and the armor is also on the good side for Tier 6 premium mediums, and it's got decent view range. So it seems to be a pretty solid tank, but there's nothing that really makes it stand out from any of the other tanks up here. So let's have a look at this frontal armor, see if it's as good as advertised in the stats. Well, because it's a Panther, it's got sloped frontal armor. It's got 85mm of frontal armor in the garage, but it's more like 121 thanks to that sloping. So that's going to cause some lower tier tanks problems going through it. Most similar tiers may be able to go through it, especially if they're shooting down on it, but because it's a German tank, you want to try and stay slightly angled, and then the effective frontal armor goes up to about 133, 134. So yeah, it seems to be very well armored from the front. The lower glacis does look to be a weak spot, but it's not incredibly weak. It is well angled and well sloped, so you get up to about 92mm. Lots of tanks going to be able to go through this. You try and keep this hidden, try and stay hull down if you can. The front of the turret is 110mm of spaced armor thanks to that gun mantlet, but there's no armor behind it. But 110, once again, better than advertised, 100mm in the garage. And because that gun mantlet is rounded, you can see that the effective armor, if you hit at the top of the gun mantlet, much better if you hit at the bottom of the gun mantlet. Don't know whether or not it is a shot trap as it was historically, but haven't really noticed that in game. But gun mantlet definitely seems to be a lot better than advertised. So the gun mantlet covers most of the front of the turret. The turret itself, if you can avoid the gun mantlet, is 100mm as advertised. So what about this cupola? It seems to be a very big weak spot from the front. And once again, yeah, 107mm, so much better advertised than advertised. So you can hit the top of the gun mantlet and it's slightly weaker, but because it's rounded, you may have a chance of bouncing. But yeah, the gun mantlet seems to be quite good on this as well, going to cause lower tier tanks problems. Now, this tank has a huge advantage over the regular VK3002M in game because it gets 10mm more side armor. That makes it a very effective side scraper. So you can get your side armor up to 127. It can't be overmatched by 122mm guns because it's 50mm thick. So tier 8's still going to cause you a lot of problems. They don't need to hit the side of your tank. They can pretty much hit anywhere the front and go through it, but it's still pretty good against lower tiers. You can angle, you can side scrape, and it's harder to overmatch the side armor on this tank. The tracks count as 25mm of spaced armor with 40mm behind it. So once again, really good effective side armor. So you can side scrape, you can angle in this tank. Side on, nothing special. 48mm on the side of the turret, 53 on the side of the hull, which is very weak. Tracks do add a little bit of armor, but still pretty weak. You only need 65mm to go through. And the rear of the tank, that's where you want to avoid. Try not to let enemy tanks get behind you, but 47 on the back of the turret, 45 on the back of the hull. So yeah, it seems to be a very well armored typical German tank from the front, even though it's Polish in game. But you want to try stay angled, you want to try and side scrape, and then the armor can be very effective against similar tier or lower tiers. Higher tiers just gonna go through it like butter. And one other thing I forgot to mention is its hit points. I forgot to mention another big strength for this tank, which is its hit points, which comes in at 840 hit points. That is a huge number of hit points compared to most of the other tier 6 premium mediums. For example, if we look at the Thunderbolt, it's only got 750, 700, 720, 750, 750, 700, 750, 720, 730, and then, as I say, the Pudel, 840 hit points. So it seems to get over 100 hit points more than most of the other tier 6 premium mediums. That's another big strength. So you've got a tank with decent armor compared to the other tier 6 premium mediums, and you've got a lot of hit points compared to the other tier 6 premium mediums. Now, having said that, you're still going to get into tier 8 games. You're still going to get two-shot killed by Scorpion Gs or whatever happens to be packing a very big gun, but it does give you a lot more survivability in addition to the armor. So to sum up, we've got decent hit points, decent armor, decent mobility, decent penetration, decent view range, decent DPM. It seems to be a pretty good tier 6 premium medium. So let's check out the gun in action, and this replay is all about the gun, which is a Rheinmetall Borsig KWK 42L70, which you should be familiar with. A lot of the German tanks use this gun, tanks like the Stug or the E25 or the Panther M10, but this was a high velocity gun, and it was a 75mm, but thanks to that extra long barrel and a lot of propellant, this is a gun that has a lot of penetration. So we've got 150mm of penetration, 135 damage, 194mm of penetration, 135 damage with the premium ammo, although I don't think I fire any premium ammunition in this game, I'm not 100% sure, but long story short, the extra length of this barrel meant that even though this was a 75mm gun, it actually had more penetration in real life than the Tiger had with its 88mm, so very dangerous gun, even though in-game the alpha damage isn't considered particularly high. But we are here on Overlord. We are a tier 6 in a tier 7 game, and we're going to go, and as I say, this replay is all about the gun. It's about its accuracy, its aim time, and the turret traverse, while not the quickest on this tank, I find is actually okay. It is actually okay. It is not terribly slow, or it's not tank destroyer slow. So we're just going to advance. And as you can see, we're accelerating. We're at 37 kilometers an hour, struggling to reach our top speed, but we are going over rough ground. Am I at the correct speed? Yeah. Alright, there we go. So first victim up here, AMX-12T, and you can see we can sneak a shot in there. So I mean, the aim time, not amazing. It's not the, it's probably the worst aim time of any of the tier 6 mediums, but it's basically the same aim time as most of the tier 6 mediums, so that's not a bad thing. But I've decided that because we're not sending very many tanks down the 9-0 line, and because we've got a lot of tanks that seem to have gone beach, including our top tier Tiger, I decided that I'm going to come over here into a heavy position, because we don't seem to have very many tanks over here, and I don't really want to work the 9-0 lines alone, especially with a dangerous SU-8 on the enemy team. So there's a T-25 AT, he's a tier 7 on the other side of this ridge from me. We're just poking, this is a little bit dangerous, but we're poking to try and get a shot in, and then the Crusader pops. So you see the reload is actually okay. We bounce on the KV-1S here. But yeah, penetration is going to let you down now and again, but we can move out. I'm trying to track this guy, but we can kill him with that shot. But we can move out. We've got a relatively quick reload, even though our alpha isn't too high. And as you can see, the aim time, even though it's not amazing, we can still fire relatively quickly and relatively accurately, even though we're not fully aimed. So KV-1 in the distance. And this is a tank that will bounce. The gun will bounce. So that was a bounce on the KV-1. I should be going for track shots here, but he's dead anyway. He's sitting side on, but yeah, you can bounce, and keeping the tank angled and hold down, and we're bouncing. As you can see, the armor is effective. My driver is dead, but Dicker Max in the distance, he's not aiming at me, so we can just fire. Fire again. Oh, and RT's finally taken an interest in me. So T-25 AT has moved up. SU-8 has been spotted. He's taking fire. So that's the last action of that SU-8. I don't need my driver. There's no point in healing my driver. I don't need my driver to poke on this corner. I can accelerate out, put shots in. I can reverse with 20 kilometers an hour. So this tank is quite good at peekaboo. Oh, 82. That was an accurate shot. We hit his cupola but failed to pen. And that one went a little bit low and hit his upper casement, so that was a bounce. Wondering if the Dicker Max is back, if we can go for a couple of blind shots, but okay, 82's taken out. We can put a shot into the Crusader. And once again, we're bouncing. I mean, I finally put my driver in because I figure I might have to do some driving. There are tanks behind me. So, okay. Maybe a little bit slow to look at the mini-map, but tanks behind us, and we can just turn our attention to these guys. There's a Crusader in front, he's not a threat. At that distance, we're doing a little bit of damage. Okay. And not getting our shots in. I don't know where that shot went, but yeah, as you can see, this is a sniper. This is best used at long range, or medium to long range, I would say. But having said that, when you're in a tier 7 game, this tank is strong enough to be played as top tier. It can be played aggressively. When you're top tier, you definitely have to play it aggressively. So KV-1S, and we can finish him off for, oh, that cheeky little 12T. So he's got a couple of shots into me, but wasn't quick enough to get him. Alright, VK3002D. Put one shot into him. Gonna try and save the T-28 heavy tank concept because the tank has gotten behind him. Rate of fire is quick enough to take him out. Still no sign of that Crusader. And okay, so there's a Sherman Jumbo and IS. We're up to 6 kills. I'm on half health, or just less than half health. Our team have, eventually gone through the beach, and eventually have decided to join the game by coming up the enemy, in towards the enemy spawn, but got a couple more shots into the Dicker Max. Oh, and Crusaders behind me. I was wondering where that shooting was coming from, so we can swing around. Gotta help the T-28 heavy tank concept again. That takes us up to 8 kills. And 2 tanks left on the enemy, or 3 tanks left on the enemy team. 2 tanks are below me to the left, at least that's where they were last spotted. So, yeah, I'm at tier 6. I'm about to shoot the side of an IS. And we're bouncing. And this is the downside. Sometimes without premium ammunition we can track him, but you can see I've got an orange reticule even on his side armor here. We aim carefully, take him out, and there is kill number 9. Not quick enough to pick up the kill on the Sherman Jumbo. But yeah, 150 millimeters of penetration. Well done, T-67. Don't know what you're doing. So 1 tank left on the enemy team. I'm just going to speed this up because I go hunting for him. And unfortunately, he turns up that he was an A0 the whole time. So I don't actually manage to pick up kill number 10. But I'm searching, I'm trying, and there he is. He's just driven into our cap. So we can accelerate, we can move into enemy cap, pick up a few cheeky cap points. But yeah, 9 kills as not top tier, tier 6, tier 7 game. I think the gun is good enough. The only time you're going to suffer is when you're up against tier 8s. So we picked up an ace for that game, we picked up a Radley Walters, an Oskins medal for killing 3 enemy tanks or tank destroyers with a medium tank in one battle. They had to be 1 tier higher, so I managed to kill all 3 tier 7s on the enemy team. Picked up high caliber, sniper, and top gun. So even though I was playing aggressively, even though most of my damage was done at close range, we still ended up picking up sniper. And this is what this gun does. I mean, it's good enough to snipe with, although against higher tier tanks you're going to be bouncing a lot more. But the shell velocity, good enough to snipe, the accuracy good enough to snipe, the aim time good enough to snipe, so you could play it from medium to long range if you want to, but I think when you're a tier 6 in a tier 7 game, or a tier 6 in a tier 6 game, you've got to play it a little bit more aggressively. So we finished top on XP with 1646, so nice XP total. We did over 3k damage, 3.2k damage with 9 kills. We didn't get that much assistance damage because we're pretty much shooting all the tanks we were spotting ourselves, but happy with the damage, 40 shots fired, and I had plenty of ammunition. That's less than half the ammunition in the tank. So I fired 40 shots in that game and still had 42 shots left. This tank is capable of doing a heck of a lot of damage. Damage blocked by armor 185, received 7 hits, 3 non-pens, 4 penetrations. Happy with that. Spotted 3 damage, 10 of the enemy team, destroyed 9, 265 assistance damage, and finished up with 69,000 credits overall. First game of the day was a ×2, left me on 8,000 XP, but yeah, the Pudel, it is a strong tank, and I think basically if you might already have a Panther M10 in your garage, think of it as a Panther M10, but move it a tier lower, so that basically you see the same tanks as the Panther M10, but you also have the benefit of being top tier in a tier 6 game, which the Panther M10 doesn't get, and you have the possibility of seeing tier 4s, which the Panther M10 doesn't get, but it's essentially the same tank. So yeah, the gun, it's pretty good. So let's talk about crew. Now, it's a Polish tank, so this is going to be very, very quick because it's the only Polish tank in the game. Is it a good crew trainer? I have no idea. It seems to have a very balanced crew like you would expect from most Panthers, with a commander, a gunner, a driver, a radio operator, and a loader. But if or when Wargaming decide to add Polish tanks into the game, there's no way of knowing whether or not it's a good crew trainer or how many Polish medium tanks may eventually end up in the game. So let's just skip the crew and move on to equipment, because there aren't too many equipment choices. What we've got is it's a tier 6, so some of the equipment that you might find on higher tier tanks is not available. Starting off with a toolbox, a complete waste of time unless you're starting off with a poor crew like I did and have a spare equipment slot and don't have credits to put better equipment on. So toolbox only viable if you're starting out with a pretty poor crew, but this tank came with Brothers in Arms automatically, so you know, toolbox can be pretty much skipped. Filling the tanks with CO2, it doesn't go on fire that often, or I haven't noticed too many fires, and I think there are better pieces of equipment. Enhancing the suspension and torsion bars, complete waste of time on this tank. Enhanced gun laying drive to improve the aim speed. Now, it does have the worst aim speed of any of the tier 6 premium mediums, but it's joint worst with pretty much most of them, and the aim time is not bad on the tank. So it is a possibility, but I don't think the aim time is bad enough on the tank to warrant spending 500,000 credits to put this on. I think there are better pieces of equipment. Coated optics is one of those pieces, because basically this is a tank that gets 370 meters of view range, which is very good for a tier 6 with coated optics, because I tend to play this aggressively on the move if I can. That's my choice. However, this is a support tank. If you're going to get into a lot of higher tier games, if you're going to get into tier 7 games, tier 8 games, you might choose to play it a little bit more as a support tank, in which case as a sniper, maybe enhancing with a gun lane drive to enhance your aim time is a better option. Maybe binocs are a better option, but personally I think coated optics suit me because I can play it aggressively when I'm top tier, and when I'm not top tier I'm going to be playing it passively and relying on other tanks to spot for me anyway. So yeah, coated optics is what I've gone for, but binocs is an option if you're a passive player who prefers just sitting back and sniping, but not for me. Medium caliber gun rammer, absolute must on this tank, on pretty much on any tank. Improve your reload time, improve your DPM by about 10%, so this gives you an extra 210 damage per minute if you install the gun rammer on the tank, so absolute must for me. Spall liner, complete waste of time on this tank. Again, you want to try and stay on the move, you want to try and stay hull down, try and avoid RT if you can, but you're pretty well armored for its tier, so maybe HE from RT isn't going to be doing as much damage to this tank as it does to other tanks. Wet ammo rack, complete waste of time on this tank, because you can also put improved vents on the tank, which is is my next option. Improved vents just improves the tank by about 2.5% all round, and because this tank is a tier 6, it doesn't get vert stabs, which I would normally put on a medium tank, so I get the option of putting improved vents and improving the tank all round, so that improves my DPM, my mobility, my traverse speed, my view range, pretty much everything on the tank. And a camo net, complete waste of time, unless, as I say, you're short on credits and want to play this as a sniper, completely passively. You use a camo net and binocs, but I don't think that's the best way to play the tank. So overall, the equipment choices I've gone for are the medium caliber gun rammer, the improved vents, and the coated optics, and that way when I'm top tier I can really bully enemy tanks. Now just remember, this is quite a heavy tank, it's quite fast, it's also very good at ramming, so you know, bear that in mind when you're playing it aggressively, or that you can play it aggressively. But as always, that's just what I've gone for. Equipment choices are completely up to you. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I try and show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. We are here on Steps. I am a tier 6 in an all tier 6 game. So this game basically is going to show you, as I've been saying, or will be saying in the review, that it's a good tier 6 tank, and what better way to prove it than an all tier 6 game. So I could show you some tier 8 games, but they weren't particularly good because very few tier 6s are good against tier 8s, but plenty of bounces, plenty of problems penetrating enemy tanks, plenty of getting shot once or twice in tier 8 games. But as a tier 6 in a tier 6 game, this is where this tank shines. It can do well in tier 7 games, as you saw in the first replay, but it's just as good. It's much better, actually, I should say, in a tier 6 game. And when you consider that this isn't even a regular tier 6 game, you know, all tier 6s on either side is relatively rare compared to the number of times you get top tier and get to face tier 5s, tier 4s. This tank can be an absolute monster. But as it steps, I'm coming over to the proper flank. The flank that you should go pretty much every time you play this map. It is encounter, but once again we've got lots of people camping spawn, lots of people moving down the 1-2 lines, and I'm just going to advance. So there's plenty of dangerous tanks on the enemy team. There's a bunch of VKs, VK 3001D, 3001P. Yeah, I'm probably going to run into those guys because they haven't appeared on the minimap yet, but our Skoda T25 moved up. I was going to hang back because it's just basically the two of us along with the T150 that's taking his time getting over here. But I'm going to advance, and I'm wondering, yeah, I'm probably going to run into the VKs because we've killed 2 tanks already. Okay, there's a P, and there's a D. Alright, so, oh, he managed to pen me. So he put a good shot into my cupola, I put a shot into him, and we're bouncing on the gun mantlet of the P. I'm trying to hit his cupola, but not managing it. So, okay, so 3 of the VKs are over here around this corner. Let's see how we do. So, this is all about, this replay is all about the armor. You saw the mobility was very good. We got up to our top speed getting into position. And yeah, okay, shooting may not be the best. This was a game that was played pretty late, I believe at night, but we can put a shot in, just trying to snipe cupolas here, trying to stay on the move to keep my cupola hidden. And we're doing it, but yeah, I don't have that much backup. T150 has moved up, Skoda T50 is capping. Or the Skoda, what is it, T25 is capping, and oh, that shot was awful. So I'm being charged down, and lots of enemy tanks here. But for some reason the Cheeto decides to stop. He's trying to reset. We hit his gun mantlet. Probably the one place we would have bounced on that tank, but we could just keep pouring fire in here. You can see the rate of fire is good enough. We're bouncing shots. We've already bounced 1,000 damage. So the enemy tanks are moving up. They're trying to stop the cap, trying to snipe cupolas, but end up getting penned there. So enemy tanks moving up. It's just a matter of doing as much damage to them as possible, as quickly as possible. Okay, alright, move forward, stay on the move, don't give easy shots at the cupola. My shooting is not the best, I'm rocking the tank, and I'm missing shots as a result, but we get another one in there. Yeah, okay, and you can see even though the cupola is a weak spot, this guy's bouncing. Another missed shot on a cupola, so yeah, my shooting is not the best in this particular game, but again, what you want to do, miss the machine gun port on the 3001P, but what I want you to do is look at the damage blocked. So I've done 1500 damage, but I've also blocked 1600 damage. So again, just rocking. Oh, he managed to get a shot into my cupola there, but we traded damage with him, and we can get shots in. I'm not firing any premium ammunition, and just still trying to work on these cupolas. And another one in. So another more damage blocked. That guy seems to be using the short 88. I've got more penetration, faster rate of fire. But just keeping these guys occupied. Oh, this guy's advancing. This guy does not look as if he's going to stop. Now, this tank is very, very good at ramming. So we get him down to a one-hit kill. He's running into me. And boom, he's just rammed himself to death on me. That's, yeah, I probably don't ram enough in this tank. But we can get a shot into Cupola going for the side of the turret. And we can finish that guy off. So, essentially, we've done 2,500 damage. We've bounced 2,200 damage. So when you stay angled, as I get penned, when you stay angled and when you stay on the move to prevent easy shots on your Cupola, you can bounce a lot of damage. This tank, when it's top tier, when it's in a tier 6 game, the armor is good, the gun is good, the penetration is decent, even though we were bouncing a few shots, but missed a lot of shots. My shooting wasn't the best, but I saw you decent. You know, the first game was all about the gun. This one, it's all about the armor, it's all about the mobility. So 2 tanks left on the enemy team. I'm on 3 kills, and as I say, very happy with the amount of damage blocked with my armor. So as you can see, we're accelerating. We're not getting up to our top speed, but we can. You know, when we get a longer run up, we can get up to 55 kilometers an hour. So there's RT in a Type 64. Type 64 is in the south. There's RT, and I've got nothing to shoot at. I've just got his gun. Just got his gun. No, not doing any damage here. Alright, hit his gun again. Okay, this is disappointing. Not going to get a kill. AMX-12T puts a shot in. I'm not going to get a kill. Okay, RT's going for him. I don't know why the AMX-12T didn't shoot again. Maybe he was on a reload, but we end up picking up kill number 4. The Type 64 in the south was taken out, and it's another victory. So we picked up another ace for that game. We picked up Steel Wall because that was all about its armor, and we picked up High Caliber. Now, there were no lower tier tanks shooting at me. It was all similar tier tanks, and as a tier 6, I think this is a strong one. It's got better side armor than the VK3002M, although in the position I was in, maybe the 3002M could have done almost as well, but maybe the Cupola wouldn't have bounced as many shots. But this is a tank that is got decent mobility. It's got very, very good armor when it's top tier. It's got a decent gun. You don't have to fire a lot of premium ammunition if you're top tier. It can do a job in tier 7 games. It can do a job definitely in tier 6 games, and it's a monster against lower tier tanks. It's actually a very, very good tank. The only time the Pudel will let you down is against tier 8s. Now, you do have extra hit points against tier 8s, but your armor isn't going to count for very much. So yeah, I was happy with that result. We finished top on XP with 1308, 2,560 damage done, 41 shots fired that time. Not as much damage as the first game, and a lot more bounces, but basically I missed a lot of shots because I was taking snapshots, not letting the gun aim in fully. So yeah, okay, occasionally the gun can let you down, but I think most of that was basically me shooting badly. We received 15 hits, and this is the important one. We managed to bounce 12. Now, these were similar tier tanks, all tier 6 tanks shooting at me, but staying angled, staying hull down meant they had severe problems penning me. Now, they could have rushed me, they could have overwhelmed me with numbers, but they didn't, and the armor held up. So we spotted 2, damaged 5, destroyed 4, 187 assistance damage because I was shooting everything I was spotting myself, and we ended up earning 57,000 credits with a premium account. So, yeah, I must have actually done a personal missions job there as well. I didn't realize, but yeah, I think the Pudel, it's a very, very strong tier 6 medium, or premium medium. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Should the Pudel appear in the gift shop coming up shortly or soon for the Christmas event, or sometime in the future and you haven't got one yet? Is it going to be worth picking up? Well, we're going to start with the strengths, because probably the first strength for this tank is its gun. You get very good penetration for its tier. 150 penetration is very, very good. 135 alpha damage, not so good, but decent rate of fire, decent DPM. You can get the DPM up to about 2,300 with crew skills and equipment. The accuracy is pretty good for its tier. Aim time, not amazing, but it's alright, and the shell velocity of 925 is very, very good. So this is a pretty good gun for its tier. Not too many downsides, although alpha damage might be considered one, but I don't. I think the rate of fire and DPM are pretty good. So the gun is good on the tank. The tank has armor. You can get upwards of around 130, 140 millimeters of armor with side scraping, with angling. So frontal hull armor, frontal turret armor, all very good, and the Cupola, even though it looks like a weak spot, isn't isn't, you know, it is weaker than a lot of the other front of the tank, but it's not particularly a weak spot, so you can bounce with your cupola as well. I think the armor is very, very good. Combine that with the fact it's quite a heavy tank, and, you know, the fact it can get up to 55 kilometers an hour makes it very, very good at ramming. That's another strength that I really didn't show off too much during my games, but it's very good at ramming enemy tanks. It's also pretty mobile for a big, heavy German tank, so you can get up to your 55 kilometers an hour. The acceleration is there. The traverse speed, you know, you will bleed off a little bit of speed, but it's still okay. Turret traverse, not amazing, but you know, it can still brawl, especially when it's top tier. If you're not top tier, then don't take this thing brawling, because you are going to get killed. Turret traverse is not good enough, and against higher tier tanks, the armor isn't good enough. But yeah, for a tier 6, I think it's very well armored, very mobile, and you know, as I say, a decent rammer, so all strengths. It's got a lot of hit points. Not only does it have armor, it gets 840 hit points, which is a huge number of hit points for a tier 6. It's over 100 hit points, or more than 100 hit points more than most of the other tier 6 premium mediums, so that's a big positive for the tank, and it gets a lot of ammunition. So the view range is also very, very good at 370 and can be boosted, so really this tank has a heck of a lot of strengths. I probably missed a couple. Now, does it have any weaknesses? Well, yeah, the alpha damage, as I say, is not particularly high for a tier 6, although it's not terrible, but probably the biggest weakness is the fact that it is a tier 6. It is going to get into tier 8 games, and tier 8s are going to tear you apart, but there are very few tier 6 tanks that can stand up to tier 8s. The discrepancy in hit points and gun and alpha damage are just too high. So yeah, you are going to suffer against tier 6s, especially, or tier 8s, especially with that penetration, even though the premium ammunition is okay at 194 as well. 194 versus a lot of, you know, tier 8s with heavy armor. Yeah, it's going to be difficult unless you have to fire premium, and even then, no guarantee of doing any damage. It's also a Panther, so it's quite big, so it's an easy target to hit. I mean, you can go hull down, but you're still going to be exposing a lot of your tank. So big side profile, big rear profile. It's quite a tall tank. It's bigger than some of the heavies in the game, so yeah, it's going to be easy to hit this thing. And as I say, it's the only Polish tank in the game, so absolutely no idea whether or not it's a decent crew trainer. You're going to be playing this thing for credits. You're going to be you're going to be playing this thing not only for credits, but also just to try and build up a crew on the chance that Wargaming eventually release Polish tanks into the game, or a Polish tech tree, and you know, there's no sign of that or no mention of that yet, so you're going to be training up a crew pretty much for no reason at the moment, but you know, that could be considered another negative. But overall, I think it is a very strong tier 6 premium medium. I think there are better ones. I'd still prefer to play the Cromwell B. I still think the Cromwell B is a better tank, but this is a tank that can hold its own, and you can't really compare it against the Cromwell B because there are two very different tanks. The Cromwell B, fast, it's mobile, it's relatively low profile compared to this. You can circle enemy tanks to death in the Cromwell B, whereas this thing is more of a support tank. You basically can play frontline if you are a top tier, but if you're not top tier, you're going to be playing as a support tank. And Cromwell B can pretty much scout, it can pretty much do anything. About the only thing the Cromwell B does worse than this is gun handling, sniping. So this thing is far better at distance, it's got far better shell velocity, it's got far more penetration, so this tank is capable of doing more damage at distance than the Cromwell B is. But overall, I think it's got a place in the game. I think it's a pretty good tank. There are very few weaknesses, and if you want to learn how to side scrape, if you want to learn how to angle, this is not a terrible tank to do it. And the other bonus for this tank is the fact that if you don't or aren't sure about whether or not to buy it, or don't want to buy it, hop into the VK3002M, and if you can play that tank and play it well, this is a slightly better version. It's pretty much the same tank, but you get 10mm more side armor, so it's slightly better than the regular tier 6 in game. So I think the Pudel is a decent tank, and I think it's worth it, but you know, it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that this is just another tank that is a copy of a tank that's in game, slightly different camo, but you know, it's not an original tank, but it may be the first Polish tank, but it's not original. But the problem I have is that Wargaming's new philosophy, you know, the previous philosophy being premium tanks should be better than stock tanks of their own tier, but worse than fully upgraded ones. That philosophy has gone out the window. There was no official announcement. They just continue releasing overpowered tanks. They're a business. They want to make money, and they make money by releasing overpowered tanks. Now, I don't think the Pudel is overpowered, but I do think it's as good as, if not better, than the regular tank in-game, the VK3002M. In fact, there is no question about it. It's better than the VK3002M because it's got more side armor and can side scrape. It doesn't get overmatched by 122mm guns. So it's a better tank than the VK3002M. And even though it's not an overpowered tank, and even though it's a good tank, players will buy it because of this review, players will buy it because of other people's reviews, players will buy it because they look at the stats and go, hey, that's not a bad tank. But it doesn't take a step back from Wargaming's new philosophy of releasing overpowered tanks, or tanks that are as good as, if not better, than tanks in-game. And that's exactly where the Pudel falls in. So even though it's not as OP at Tier 6 as some of the Tier 8 premiums that are being released, it's still maybe not anywhere near the philosophy of being better than a stock tank or worse than a fully upgraded tank of its own tier. So that makes it a good tank. And Wargaming, as I say, are in business to make money. So players are the only ones who can, maybe change their philosophy. But players aren't going to do that because as soon as the next OP tank comes out, they're going to vote with their wallets, going to pull them out, they're going to throw money at Wargaming, and Wargaming are going to earn more money so they can build their base on the moon or whatever it is they're planning to do. Yeah, the Pudel, it's not OP, but it's not a step backwards either. And that's a little bit sad, but what can you do? It's up to the player base, and the player base seems to love overpowered premium tanks. So anyway, the Pudel, it's worth it. It's a good tank. It is worth it. It's not particularly expensive, and as I say, if Wargaming eventually do get around to releasing Polish tanks into the game, then it looks to be a pretty good crew trainer. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.